is a public meeting of the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing, Community Engagement Subcommittee. And I am going to pass it over to co-chair Odelia to get us started.
Awesome. Thanks, Dory. Hi, everyone. My name is Odelia. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the co-chair of the Community Engagement Subcommittee. And I will pass it on to my fellow co-chair to introduce themselves.
Okay, I'm unmuting. My name is Tia Palafox. My pronouns are she, her. I am a co-chair with Odelia on the Community Engagement Subcommittee, and I've been a member of PCCEP since 2021. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And let's see, I see Ashley. Ashley, can you go next?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tia. Yep, Ashley Schofield. I use she, her pronouns. I am the current PCCEP full committee co-chair. Thanks everyone for being here tonight. I'm looking for other PCCEP members. Carrie, I see your name, and Leslie. And oh, there you are, Byron. Yep, there you guys are.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. Byron Vine, PCCEP member and co-chair with Kip Silverman on the Settlement and Policy Subcommittee. Who's
Leslie?
next?
Maybe Leslie? Looks like
Yeah.
you're on.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Leslie Martinez. I'm a member of the Community Engagement Subcommittee. Sorry, I'm having dinner, so I'm going to go off camera in it shortly. And then also a member of the Policy Subcommittee. So yeah, my pronouns are she, hers. And I believe Carrie is the last one.
Thank you, Leslie. Hi, I'm Carrie Driver. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a PCCEP member and a member of the Community Engagement Subcommittee. Any other PCCEP members out there? If not, then staff.
Yeah, I think it's time for staff. So at this time, any city staff, DOJ, PPB, other folks, and also our presenters for the evening, feel free to just jump in and introduce yourselves. I'll start. I'm Dory Grabinski, PCCEP Project Manager. Thanks for being here again.
I'll jump in. Stephanie Howard, Mayor's Office. Happy to see you all tonight.
Good evening,
Hi.
Mary Claire oh, sorry, Sarah, is that you? It's Mary Claire Buckley from the Portland Police Bureau.
And Sarah Ames from the City Attorney's Office.
Hi, Samir Kanal, Advisory Boards and Commissions Manager of the Community Safety Division.
Hi, everyone. I'm Teresa Alonso Leon, one of the facilitators. Thank you.
Sorry, Teresa, I didn't mean to cut you. I was waiting for is somebody going to say something? This is Natasha Hamsberg, Portland police officer. I work in the Office of Community Engagement, and I'm excited about this meeting tonight.
Thank you.
And community members, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat as well.
And we also have some guest presenters this evening. Feel free to introduce yourselves now as well. And we'll also, I think, introduce you later on when you're presenting.
Hi, my name's Theo Latta. I use he and him pronouns. I'm sorry I'm off camera for a bit here. At the beginning of the meeting, I'll be driving, but once I get back to my my house, I'll be there. It's wonderful to see all these familiar faces. Thanks.
Be careful.
Hello, everyone. Good to see so many folks showing up tonight. My name's Adam. I'm going to be one of the guest presenters, and good to see Adam. What's up? Good to be here. Well, I'll talk more later, but I wanted to introduce myself. I'm an associate professor over at the University of Calgary. I've been working with PCCEP for a few years, so we'll be talking about some work we've been doing together.
Hey everyone, Adam Vicente with the City of Portland. I'm the Tribal Relations Program Manager. Third week going in, so good to see all of your faces and also, yeah, some familiar ones. Looking forward to tonight. And so thank you for the invite.
Thank you so much for coming.
Awesome. And we can get slides again, please.
Okay.
Jumping ahead to the overview of the meeting, I think. Sorry, skipped one. Yeah, the last slide was correct.
Okay, so our community agreements for tonight are listen actively and respectfully, share airtime, be present and open to new information and perspectives, assume positive intent, respect each other, respect the group, speak your own truth, communicate directly, honestly, and respectfully, ask questions to clarify, call out bias, and be okay with ambiguity. And then just a brief overview of tonight's meeting, if we could go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so we'll be having a presentation right after this on indigenous interactions with police, starting in a few minutes. And then at 7:30, after we wrap up the presentation, we'll have an update on the brain injury forum. And then we'll have open public comment at 7:45. Yeah.
Okay, so gonna run through updates really quickly here. Can go to the next slide. Just a reminder again, that there's a status conference hearing for the settlement agreement next Wednesday on May 15th. And PCCEP will be presenting a summary of their recommendation about Portland Street response to Judge Simon, and that status conference will also primarily focus on the appointment of the new independent monitor. Next slide. Okay, so in light of you know, the work PCCEP has been doing about the Portland Street response stuff and that recommendation, PCCEP still is waiting on a formal response. But there have been some developments about the proposed budget and the money being set aside for PSR so far. So this is just text directly from that proposed budget. And looks like Stephanie has insight on this as well. And notable here is that it looks like it's noting a move to the Office of Public Safety. And those are ongoing funds. And I'll pass it to Stephanie.
Thank you, Dory. Yeah, I just wanted to punctuate that in the mayor's proposed, and again, we are working on the formal response, but in the mayor's proposed, there is ongoing funding for PSR, and then also the assuming that council passes that, the program would be moving to the Community Safety Division and out of the Fire Bureau. So just wanted to make that all clear. So Dory, thank you. You did a great job as always of summarizing it. And again, working on that response, and we will be getting more detailed to the group in that formal response.
Great. And then just one or two more updates here. We can go back to those slides. So sometime this week, today or tomorrow is what I've heard, the PPB 2023 draft report will be available to the public. PCCEP will send that out via our mailing list. And as always, PCCEP and the public can submit comments on that. And PCCEP will be deciding how they want to review that, how they want to meet about that this year, and kind of the topics that they want to dive into. So just letting our community attendees know that that'll be in your inboxes soon. And then lastly, I think Odelia had an update she wanted to share.
Yeah, thanks, Story. Yeah, I just wanted to bring up a few things that have been happening. There was on Monday, there was a incident where the police shot and killed a community member on Monday around 5 when responding to a search warrant. Maybe someone can throw some news stories in the chat for that. I just wanted to bring attention to that here. And then also the killing of Tyrone Lee Johnson back in December, the jury just cleared the 3 officers who were involved in that. So I also wanted to bring that up. Yeah. Thanks, Story.
Leslie?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Odelia. I guess when the killing happened in December, we, had people come in, we had, a town hall around that. And I think one of the things that we talked about at that time was that when the verdict finally came through, which it just has, we were going to circle back to that and have somebody come and present on how that investigation was done and maybe talk a little bit more, because, I think there's going to be a lot of questions. I have a lot of questions about how, hearing the facts and how everything happened, how they could have been cleared, so I think there's going to have to be some conversations. And so I just wanted to circle back to what we had discussed about what we would do regardless of the verdict.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that back around, Leslie. Stephanie, you had a comment?
Just wanted to give a quick technical clarification. So what happened was that the grand jury was convened. So not the same as a trial, but the grand jury reviewing whether there was probable cause for a criminal case to go forward. And I do just want to flag also that that is only the beginning piece of the investigation. So the next piece would be the internal affairs investigation that looks at whether there were policy violations. So that crime piece is up to the district attorney's office. The next piece is up to oversight and would go through the disciplinary process to review procedure. And so that I just want to say, I think that's going to be difficult to have much additional information besides what is released from the DA's office while that investigation is ongoing. But I think absolutely a conversation that, that we can continue to have as that moves ahead.
Thanks, Stephanie. I think those are all the updates we have. And if you have any questions or comments about updates, please hold them, and we'd love to hear those at the end of the meeting during open public comment or with any remaining time. But at this time, we're going to transition into our main topic for tonight, which is a presentation on Indigenous interactions with police. So we're joined by some researchers who have been working on this subject. Very happy to have them with us tonight and to learn more about this subject. And I'm going to invite them to introduce themselves now.
Do you want me to?
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah. I just wanted to say we are so excited to have with us tonight 2 speakers on the presentation on Indigenous interactions with police. We have both Adam Murray, who's an associate professor at University of Calgary, and Theo Latta, who runs the Health Equity Program at OHSU Health Services, and is also the Tribal Affairs Advisor there. He also was a former PCCEP staff with me when I started in 2021. So I'm so excited to have Theo back with us tonight. So I wanted to give a little introduction on both Adam and Theo. Thank you so much for coming tonight, and y'all can go ahead and take it away. Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks so much for having us. I'm going to hand it off to Adam in a little bit. But I wanted to say hello again, and I'm going to be on screen in about 5 minutes, more permanently when I finish my drive. But I wanted to mention part of the utility of research that's specific to Indigenous interactions with police. When we talk about community, there's such nuance and diversity within community. So when we're talking about community, we're not talking about one thing, because the community doesn't exist as one thing, right? It's a nuanced and diverse kind of entity that looks different for different people. So when we talk about equity, it looks different for different people. When we talk about interactions with police, it looks different for different people. So that's part of why this research and these data are so important. But I'm going to hand it over to Adam, and I'll talk more later.
Thanks, Theo, for shouting it out. And thanks, Tia and Dory and everybody for both coordinating. I know it's a lot of work to put these types of things on, and I know there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. I appreciate y'all giving us a little bit of time to talk about some stuff that we've been, spending a lot of hours, working on. I'm gonna go ahead and present a little bit of slides just because folks are used to slides, and it does help sometimes if you have some visuals. And so if it's okay with all y'all, I'm gonna go ahead and share this set of slides with you. And before I talk about anything, I want to say like I live in Calgary. I live up in Canada. I live in Alberta, Treaty 7 territory, where the home of the Blackfoot Confederacy. I got the Siksika to my east, and the Piikani and Ghana First Nations to the south, Tsuut'ina Nation to the southwest, and the Stoney Nakoda to the west, including the Goodstoney, Bearspaw, and Chiniki First Nations. I wanna say like the way that I came about this. So Theo and I met, I think, around 14 years ago, something around there, something about 14 years ago. And I'll tell you, it's been a pain in the tuchus ever since I met him. But he's become a really good and trusted friend to me. I really love him a lot. And there was a time where he was working as the director of PCCEP, and there was a couple of things that he pulled me in on, because when you go on, I was born in Oregon. I was born in Grants Pass. I grew up in Los Angeles, but I have a bunch of family, a bunch of aunts and cousins and uncles and stuff live down in Southern Oregon. My mom lives in Weimar, right outside of Rogue River. So Oregon, it's home to me. I have a lot of love there, a lot of relationships there, and I did my PhD in Portland. So I did my 60 years in Portland State. I lived in Portland, walked those streets, and I have a special place for Oregon in my heart. Ultimately, my family moved there from other places. My grandma was and my grandpa were from Oklahoma. My mom, her family migrated to the United States from the Ukraine. And in, I think 2010, 2011, something like that, I met Theodore Alata, who was driving at the time where we started this meeting at a sweat lodge down in Newburgh. And, I'll tell you, I was just impressed by this man's physique. Hey, nah. I was impressed by a lot of things. His intelligence, you know, his work ethic, and eventually, you know, he got this position where he was working at PCCEP, at the Portland Committee for Community Engaged Policing, and he actually brought me into a couple of things. He said, you know, we have needs, you know, for data and for data analysis, and we have things that we're trying to make recommendations for the mayor. You know, PCCEP, because of this 2011 settlement with the Department of Justice, this collection of community members, their voices are deemed as necessary and important for providing recommendations to the mayor on how, like, the Portland Police Bureau is gonna function and who they're gonna be accountable to, and ultimately, like, what types of like standards and input are going to inform policies and decision making. And as the director, he said, you know, we have a couple of things going on. So can you see these slides okay?
Yes.
Yes.
So there was a couple of different projects. One of them had to do with a bunch of just like online data and focus groups that PCCEP had conducted back in 2020. And you got to remember, 2020, in addition to COVID, it was also the height of like the Black Lives Matter movement and George Floyd, right? There was a lot of momentum, a lot of energy, thinking about the way that like the police that we fund through taxpayer dollars interact with the populations that they are designated to serve and protect, and how that service and that protection works differently for different groups, and what that means, and where reform needs to happen, and where we need to think more critically about how this relationship either provides justice or maybe provides injustice. And you know, one of the studies that Theo asked me to participate in was the public opinion, and that is published already by PCCEP. It's up online. You can look at it. If I'm going to share these slides afterwards, but if you click on this link, right, you'll see a report that my wife and I did for PCCEP a couple of years ago. I don't know if you can see it now, but at the time, Theo and I, you know, we were talking, you know, we were saying, you know, largely indigenous experiences with police are being kind of eclipsed or overshadowed by other minorities' experiences with the police. And at the time, the tribal liaison, I don't recall her name offhand, but she had brought up, I guess, at some PCCEP meetings, you know, that indigenous experiences at the police weren't getting enough attention in it, you know, compared to other minority groups' experiences with the police. And so, you know, Theo, he approached me. He said, I would like to bring some type of attention to this. You know, I would like to make this something that PCCEP is doing, something that people are aware of, something that people are conscious of, you know, so that when they have those like ruminations, those contemplations about like what kind of recommendations can we give to the mayor, you know, that they're informed by things that are tangible and real and important in a lot of people's lives, you know, that just might not ever make it, you know, to the media or to public consciousness. And so one of the things, in addition to the one that we already were, you know, wrote the report for, we said, like, how do we recenter indigenous perspectives? And it was a difficult thing. You know, on the one hand, let's say that, you know, you say, well, what are these interactions comprised of? What do they look like in Portland? If you brought together a bunch of indigenous folks who had been harassed or profiled by the police, or you have both a problem of credibility. I mean, a lot of these folks, you know, that might encounter the law, maybe there's reasons, you know, that if you hosted a town hall or something, that when they complained about their treatment of the police, you know, maybe the person who's the most willing to speak up at that meeting, the most willing to stand up in front of a bunch of strangers and say these types of things, maybe that's not the person that represents everybody's experiences, even though there is a theme that's going on that's bigger or broader than that one person. maybe their credibility is suspect, maybe they're doing crimes. And then on the other hand, what if you ask people about their experiences and it's unfair and it's unjust and it's profiling and it's stereotypical? Well, aren't you going to re-traumatize those folks? We don't want to do that. We just want to talk about this indigenous experiences with the police. We're not trying to bring up a bunch of bad memories. Well, okay. So let's talk to the police. Well, aren't they going to be, legally or financially liable for talking about things that they're not supposed to talk about? So we had this dilemma, about how to recenter Native Americans' experiences in Portland without, going to the direct source. And so, we thought about it because it's still important. It's still important to talk about. In Portland and Multnomah County, I took this from I don't know if you remember the unsettling profiles that took place. I guess it was over a decade ago. I think they focused on 5 populations: Latinos and Blacks and Eastern Europeans. But the first one that they did was on Native Americans. And this is what they said. They said, we're the 9th largest urban Indian population in the USA. We're home to 28 Native organizations in the Portland area, run by and staffed by Native people, whose combined resources represent over $50 million in revenue that go to local taxes, businesses, and services. The legacy of pride and resilience has resulted in the development of a powerful core of advocates in the region. This grit and determination has ultimately led to the emergence of a robust and vital Native American presence in Multnomah County. This is also the case that there's a lot of indigenous people in Portland because of some, admittedly, like racist legislation that took place in the mid-19th century, mid-20th century. The Termination Act and the Indian Relocation Act, which were repealed by Nixon when he was president, which he said, I'm repealing them because they're racist. One of them was the Termination Act, which they just ripped up the treaties, dissolved the federal government's relationship with tribes. And if you look up the details of the 120 tribes that were dissolved, 60 of them were in Oregon. It was one of the biggest land snatches that happened in the last 100 years. Nobody knows about it. Nobody talks about it. There's no Trail of Tears documentary on it. But it's also the case that across the United States, the Relocation Act promoted the idea that because there's so much poverty on the reservations, which were largely caused by embargoes to economic development that the government instituted through like the Bureau of Indian Affairs, to create poverty in those sections, they incentivized moving away from reservations, which the expectation was that you would intermarry with the Blacks and Latinos, and eventually your blood quantum would be so low you wouldn't be Native American anymore, and then you wouldn't be able that we wouldn't have this Indian people's problem. So there's both of those legislations, in addition to just normal human migration and movement, has resulted in a fairly large urban indigenous, urban Native American community in Multnomah County in the Portland area. In 2011, when this Unsettling Profile series came out, it was shown that Native Americans in the area were going to experience violent crime 2.5 times more than their white neighbors. In addition, they were going to be arrested 2 times as much as their white neighbors. Right. So overrepresentation was a problem. Over policing on the one hand was a problem, but also under policing, right? Why would you also be the victim of crimes and be arrested for crimes more, right? So it's both a problem of under policing and over policing. And so Theo and I, we're talking about this over the late hours, we're contemplating these things, and we're saying, PCCEP has a unique opportunity to make recommendations to the mayor, to think about these things that would otherwise go unvoiced. So with that background, I'm going to talk with you about a little bit of a research, what do you call it? A study, an attempt to try to produce some information about a thing. And with this, I also want to acknowledge Catherine Chung, who is a student of mine. Like I said, I'm a professor at the University of Calgary, and one of the benefits of being a professor is that have access to a lab and to really intelligent, hardworking students that are trying to like do things that are important. And Catherine Chung is one of those people who have basically dedicated hundreds, if not thousands of hours to helping me like read articles and look at the larger context of all of this stuff, so we can try to wrap our minds around it. Okay, so just one quick thing. This was a compromise in some ways, right? Like I said, we couldn't go and talk to the police. They couldn't talk about their interactions with Indigenous people for a lot of reasons. Legally, it's part of their job, right? They don't want to incriminate themselves or their fellow colleagues. And at the same time, we didn't want to re-traumatize the people who had been victims of Indigenous violence. And so we said, what's a good way to think about? What's a good way to look at the way that people are thinking about and talking about and feeling about Indigenous interactions with the police? So we decided to look at the way that it's represented in media. Okay. So just to give a little bit of like national statistics, a little bit of a bigger background. Indigenous folks they die at the hands of the police or while in custody of the police at the same rates as our brothers and sisters in the Black community. One of the areas where they're like grossly different is that Indigenous women are more likely to die at the hands of the police than Black women. And if you look at like gendered analyses, white women are the least likely to be killed by the police, whereas Indigenous women are the most likely. Okay. So that's an important gender difference, because within the Black community, it's largely a male phenomenon. Black men are much more likely to be killed by the police than Black women. Now, despite this, for every African American who's killed at the hands of the police, they get 6.5 news stories about it. Whereas for every Native American who gets killed by the police, they get 1 news story about it. Okay. So nobody will know about it. It's just not going to be known. Like, nobody's going to talk about it. Nobody's going to tweet about it, because the news, which is the source of most people's information, especially data-based information, is going to come from the news. It's just not going to be part of people's consciousness. So in the effort to work with PCCEP and to try to understand this Indigenous interactions with the police, we thought, let's start a couple of degrees distance and let's understand how it's represented in at least 3 different sources of media. Okay, one of them was the news. I'll talk more about this in detail when I get to the methods section. But the news was exclusively from the Pacific Northwest. We tried our best to get it mostly from Oregon, but we also included stuff from the surrounding region, like Southern Washington and stuff. We also looked at social media. Okay, so we looked at tweets, and then or Twitter, sorry, and then we looked at the scholarly literature because we the assumption there was that the scholarly literature would provide the most, I don't know, anchored or evidence-based. But like I said, I'll talk about this more in the next slides. Just to throw out some terms, when we say discourse, because sometimes discourse, right? Like who uses that word? Right? It's a weird word. But when you say discourse, basically what it means is the way that people talk about a thing. Okay. So when you say like, what's the discourse about this, or what's the discourse about that? It means, how are people talking about it? What's the gist? You know, how are things being construed? How are things being presented? How are people understanding? How are people talking about it back and forth? Now, this will come up more later. You know, when we talk about who is Indigenous within Oregon, it's fairly clear, you know, that we're talking about Native Americans, descendants of people who are enrolled in tribes that were here before the Europeans settled these lands. colonize these lands, and who have a special treaty relationship with the federal government, a special nation-to-nation relationship with the federal government. But you'll see that because there just wasn't that much information that was specific to the Pacific Northwest, especially when we looked at like the literature, the academic literature, that we had to expand that to look at Indigenous folks from Canada, Indigenous folks from New Zealand and Australia, at least in terms of like Twitter and the academic literature. There just wasn't enough that was specific to y'all's region, and so we had to look as a baseline. So I'll talk about this more later, but we're comparing the news to the way that it gets talked about and studied about in other places. The news from your area. Okay, so in case you all don't know, the way that things are understood in media is important to the way that we think about things. And so, although we would love to hear the police's perspective, and we would love to hear people who interact with the Indigenous peoples who interact with the police for every different reason, we would love to hear from them directly as just as the first domino in a long set of dominoes, just a way to get the conversation started. You know, we said, all right, well, let's think about the way that people think about this. What's the discourse, eh? What's the way that people think about this, you know, across these different outlets? We used a method called content analysis. Content analysis, if you look it up, it's basically a glorified tallying system, where when the things that show up, you count them as they show up. So you care about something. The method, if you look back in the history, was developed during World War II to study propaganda from Germany, Nazi propaganda. And they said, well, how do we understand how they're socializing their people? Okay, well, let's count how often racial superiority comes up, or let's count how much economic security comes up. Let's start tallying the messages that people are getting. And so this has been used. Harding in 2005 used this to look at the way that tribes were represented, how within the media, and they showed that when in the news, that usually when Indigenous issues show up, that they often surround issues of corruption, and that the message or mascots, right, and that often the message that comes out of it is that, oh, government intervention is an important thing, or these folks can't self-determine themselves. And so there was what we would argue, looking from the lens of Indigenous community members, is kind of a racist slant within the media, right? So we had expectations that perhaps the news might not have pro-Indigenous perspectives represented. Okay, this was an expectation that we had. On the other hand, we had seen research come out working with the Sami people that social media could be used as a voice for Indigenous issues, right? So that whereas the news might be controlled by whatever interest, maybe social media, right, might represent the people's perspectives, right? Now, we didn't have data to look at who was doing the tweets, but we expected that social media would have a more favorable or more grassroots representation of opinion. Okay. Now, the scholarly literature, it's hard to know which way it was going to go, right? On the one hand, scholarly literature is a tool of the institutions and a tool of the establishment. And if you look at like the old eugenics or the old social Darwinian scholarship, right? Intellectuals have definitely been used to advance racist notions. But on the other hand, there's been more opportunity, more growth, right, for ideas of Indigenous scholarship, Indigenous ways of knowing and being, more space for critical ideologies within academic spaces than many others. So we didn't know what to expect. The scholarly literature could have served the establishment, but it also could have been a voice for underrepresented groups. So when we phrase these things in terms of hypotheses, our expectations were that the news was going to be more conservative, that social media was going to be more liberal, and that the scholarly literature could go either way. Okay. All right. So I mentioned this method of content analysis. One of the reasons, like I said, that we chose this was because, for one, we didn't have access to police opinion. And then for the indigenous opinion, we had this ethical concern about re-traumatizing. We said, listen, all we want to do, the only thing we wanted to do was encourage PCCEP to start thinking about the way that indigenous folks in Portland interacted with the police, right, and highlight that type of thing. We didn't want to bring up a bunch of people's bad memories. We didn't want to incriminate anybody, and we definitely didn't want to get into any kind of victim blaming scenario. So content analysis was great, right, because we could look at something that we didn't bother anybody, we didn't re-traumatize anybody, we didn't risk any police members' confidentiality agreements or legalities or anything. And so we started looking at this media. In the end, we looked at about 50 news articles between 1996 and 2020 from the local news. The local news came from Oregon and Washington, basically. Social media, we had 268 tweets. About 23% of these was from the US. 64% was from Canada, 26% was from Australia, and less than 1% was from New Zealand. All of the tweets came from 2020, just because if you know about tweets, I mean, gee whiz, there's just thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of them. So we restricted it to the year that we were asked to do this work. And then for the literature was a little bit harder to get. We got about 58 articles, about a third of them from Canada, a third of them from the US, and then the other third of them from Australia, New Zealand. And those range from 1937 all the way to 2021. All right, so we coded for a bunch of things. And when I say coded, what does that mean? All right, well, what it means is that every time that we read an article, every time that we read a tweet, every time that we read a news article, that we basically coded it for what's the vibe. Is this like a positive article? Is this saying, hey, look, at something worked well? We're all happy here? Is this a negative article? Oh, you know, did something bad happen? You know, are we angry at somebody? You know, who was at fault? Was it the police? Was it the criminal justice system? Was it the indigenous person who got arrested or rescued? And then whose perspectives were being represented here? You know, what did they quote indigenous people? Did they quote tribal representatives? Or did they quote police officers? Or did they quote police representatives? You know, whose was the source of the information that got cited? Except for valence, which was like a negative one for if it was bad and a positive one if it was good. Everything else kind of followed this like giant code book. And I don't want to get into too much of the details because it gets super tedious and boring. And if you want to know, just email me or call me after. Okay. But there was a lot of things that we coded for, from negative experiences that indigenous people had with the police, to positive experiences that they have with the police, negative experiences that the police had with indigenous people, like getting attacked, and then positive experiences that police had with indigenous people, right? So we had a lot of different codes. We basically looked at every tweet, every article, news article or scholarly article, and whenever anything came up, if it was there, we gave it a 1. It didn't matter if it had been studied or not, as long as it got talked about, right? Because we cared about the discourse. We cared about the way that it got talked about. All right, so we ran some descriptive stats, some crosstabs, and some statistical tests. Basically, what we found was that the news was the most neutral of everything. Okay, the scholarly literature was more critical, but by far the Twitter had the most negative reviews. All right, so depending on where you get your information from, you could have a neutral or a negative opinion, right? This is one of the things that our results kind of showed. In terms of whose perspectives get included, the vast majority of the information that was out there didn't come from anybody. Didn't come from the police, didn't come from the indigenous people that were arrested or interacted with the police. It came from somebody else. And only 21% cited either an Indigenous person, an Indigenous constituency, a tribal agency, a tribal leader, and only 20% represented a police officer or a police agency or a lawyer, or something like that. Very, very few of the examples that were out there included anybody that was actually engaged in the experience. Okay. Interestingly, when you look at the police perspectives occurred more often in the news. While Indigenous perspectives, when they were there, happened more in social media. Now, every time that we found something, and now, you got to understand that a lot of times that information is just not there. Nobody says whose fault it is. But when it shows up, the news was much more likely to talk about the Indigenous person who got arrested, about their fault. When it was social media, much more likely to say that police were at fault. Now, interestingly, the academic literature, the scholarly literature that was looking at the data, they said the police were at fault around the same amount as the Twitter, but were much more likely to say that the criminal justice system itself, was what was producing these negative interactions, right? So not blaming the police, but thinking about the larger structure that the police have to operate in also. So just to throw this out there. All right, so in terms of our expectations, the news was more positive than social media and the literature. Twitter and the news didn't include Indigenous perspectives, and the literature and Twitter blamed the police more than the news did. So all this is to say that when you're thinking about, I don't know, maybe Portland residents or Oregon residents or just people in general, where are they getting their information from? Right, it's going to be from, I don't know, reasonably, it's going to come from one of these three sources. And so where these sources are coming from, this is going to shape their opinion. Now, I want to throw it out there that the majority of the opinion is that the relationship between Indigenous people and the police is not positive. And so if we're thinking like, well, what are we going to do next? What's the next steps? Well, this is the way that the discourse is happening. This is the way that people talk about it. And if we can think about social media as grassroots, and if we can think about the news as being a little bit more corporate, and we can think about the scholarly literature as trying its best, to just look at the data and be objective, right? That the scholarly literature agrees with both, right? But in some ways sides with the social media. Okay, so basically that the discourse, the way that it's presented on social media and the way that it's presented on the news, there's a little bit of misalignment there, right? Where the negative experiences that Indigenous people have with the police are not well represented in the news. If people are listening to the news, they're not going to appreciate that. They're not going to vote that way. They're not going to empathize with that, right? Maybe they do more victim blaming. Of course, we don't know this yet. And this is why, we have to acknowledge that one of the limitations of the study is that we are 2 or 3 degrees distance from the thing that we want to talk about, right? It would be best, if we could talk with the stakeholders of PCCEP, we could engage more with the tribal liaison, and the tribal liaison could engage more with both tribal leaders and folks that are on the ground, and assess like, well, what's y'all's experiences with the police? What do y'all think about it? Fully respecting the complexity that comes with this. Our data, like I said, it came from what was available to us, and we had a couple of years, to try to capture a universe and bring it into a small space that we could try to understand and comprehend. We did our best. We used some methods that were respected by kind of conventional Western methodologies, but it is for sure, not the same as looking at people's experiences, when they're, looking at each other, whether one person's in the police car and one person's in the car that got pulled over or whatever, but we thought that this was a good decision given the fact that we didn't want to re-traumatize or put people in compromising legal situations. Where we thought, what was most important is that PCEP starts thinking about this and starts talking about this and starts saying, you know what, how can we go deeper into this? Okay. On the research side, it's important to consider that where you get your news, where you get your information matters about the way that you think about it. And we would encourage everyone to be tolerant and accepting, and try to be understanding of folks that they talk about. Maybe when you have disagreements, it's because someone's getting their sources from someone else, someplace else than you are. That's a difficult situation. And you have to understand that the media influences people's opinions. And so if you get the same narrative over and over again from the news versus whether or not you get it from social media, you're going to get different messages, right? But using the kind of the scholarly literature as an anchor, there's still an issue here. And if PCEP has it in its intentions, to be pushing different agendas or to be putting different things on its 5 or 2, 5, and 10-year agenda plan, right? That to be considering the experiences of Indigenous people in Portland would be a worthwhile venture, right? Like we're saying, the evidence says that it is. So in terms of future directions, PCEP, for us, we were asked to generate a little bit of knowledge, generate a little bit of information, try to get this dynamic, this set of experiences onto PCEP's consciousness, and we're hoping that we did an okay job. Like I said, I know that this isn't the best thing. It would be super cool if we had interviewed police folks, members of the police, and folks that would interact with the police. But like I said, we did our best within the constraints that we had, and our job is to kind of bring it up, get the ball rolling. I bet that most folks don't know that Indigenous people get killed at the hands of the police at the same rates that Black Americans do. I bet you didn't know that that when it happens, it gets talked about in the news 6 times less, right, than it does if it's an African American person. And maybe you didn't know that if you listen to the news versus social media versus scholarly literature, that you would get different messages, right? So hopefully, this talk lets you know about those things. And, whether or not this turns into some recommendations immediately, or if it just sparks the conversation, right? So that maybe you guys continue to do some more research, do some more focus groups and more town halls, and work more with your tribal liaison to get community members' perspectives, right? Whatever y'all want, I don't have any type of moral superiority here. I'm not like trying to preach, but I wanted to do a good job, for PCEP. I do believe that the mission that y'all are doing, and that the thing that Theo had considered and was thinking about, along with the previous tribal liaison back in the day, was legitimate. And so hopefully, this is interesting and provocative for everybody. But here's some of our references, and if y'all have any questions, feel free to hit me up either now or later. And I'd be happy to continue to talk with PCEP and I know that y'all donate your time, that you all are working in the evening and probably either eating dinner or missing dinner or hanging out with your kids, if there's dogs barking in the background and all that stuff. And I appreciate y'all showing up and doing this work, because even though maybe most of us in this room were respectable citizens with education, with good jobs, and maybe we don't have to worry about this so much, but a lot of our cousins and brothers and sisters and our kids, they do have to worry about these things that we have the opportunity to make recommendations about. So I appreciate the time, and thank you for letting me hang out with y'all.
Thank you, Adam. This is one of the facilitators, Teresa Alonso Leon. We are going to have a Q&A after Theo perhaps wants to add additional thoughts or perspectives. Then we'll open it up to folks to ask questions. Theo, did you have additional thoughts or perspectives?
Sure.
I think we started talking about this really because it didn't exist. And we wondered why it didn't exist. And the PCEP is in a remarkable kind of space because 4 years later, it's still in a position of power and of leverage in the form of recommendation, as well as in the form of the year. You have a tribal liaison year, you have representation from PPB, you have representation from Portland Cop Watch, you have local news, you have lots of folks in this room, PPB, lots of folks in this room who are conversation havers, right? You don't have to start the conversation, you don't have to finish the conversation, but you can have these conversations with folks who care about these issues. And the fact that this doesn't exist and the fact that this is so novel, I think it puts the PCEP in an even stronger position to really be innovative in the space of Indigenous interactions with police, not just within the city of Portland, but in the country, right? So Canada, where Adam is at, they've had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. They've had a lot of different kind of innovative methods of cultivating or establishing and then cultivating relationships with the tribes that were also in a kind of a sticky wicket back in the day, right? Now they're better. Now they have they've done some of the work that we could really learn from, and I think these data and this research could really be some good conversation starters to the conversation havers on this screen. I'm happy to have a conversation. It looks like we have some time as well. If I go off camera, it's because I have to tend to my boy over there, but I'll still be here.
Thank you so much, Adam and Theo. And Adam, thank you for that amazing research and presentation. I think that definitely there's a lot of work that needs to be done and continue to be done. We'll open it up to folks who have questions. Please raise your virtual hand and we'll call you up. Adam, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Adam, or Dr. Murray, should I say. Want to make sure to give my respect and really appreciate the angle and the context and the depth that you all are trying to go to create Indigenous discourse, right? Yeah, that's some good stuff right there. My question is geared towards how in your mind how this could inform this discourse, right? And eventually not only impact the way we think, but to be able to reach the policy level, right? Because it almost seems as though
nivel de la póliza porque
oh,
Go ahead.
Sorry about that.
okay. It almost seems as though that there are so many levels of education and awareness and visibility that needs to happen, especially with media, right? And I feel like organizations such as Illuminative, for those who have not heard about that, are raising national awareness, right? They have national research that basically has polled people across the nation on Indigenous issues, on tribal issues, on issues of mascots, of representation, of all of that. And I think they've shined a light of how much America does not know, right, about Indigenous or Native people, or the issues that we face, or the continuous disparities, that are occurring. And so I just wonder around something like that, because it seems as though like, not only media has to get and mass communications need to become aware, but also police, those that are also guiding police, it kind of certainly I'm thinking about all these layers, but I just wonder, and this is of course not asking you to offer us a silver bullet. I don't want to put that much pressure on you, but at least just where's a good place to start, especially if we're thinking about city of Portland. what are some tangible things? And I did hear of my predecessors, Laura John, also try to break into spaces, such as the Portland Police Bureau and others. And I just wondering your thoughts, and if you wouldn't mind squeezing this in about if there are cities right now that are doing or creating proactive police policy in cities that are native populated, like a Seattle, like a Denver, like a Los Angeles, like a Minneapolis, or like a Vancouver, BC, or Toronto, right? All the cities have indigenous people. And so that's, I just wanted to offer that to kind of tee it up for the conversation.
I mean, Adam, it's good to see you again. Good to be in the presence of such a handsome man. And you hit me with some good questions, and I feel better able to answer the first one than the second one, only because, to be honest, my personal commitment, my personal passions have led me to work within more largely within the field of employment, trying to contribute to Indigenous employment, which is tied up with Indigenous education as well as health. And so my acquaintance with the criminal justice system and its successes and its failures is not nearly as well versed. When you had asked about the other cities, I can tell you that I'm very lucky that for the last almost 7 years I've been up here in Treaty 7 territory in Canada, that we have a reconciliation movement here, that this is a government commitment, and that because of that, it's created a financial incentive. If you read the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's, I think it's their 6th volume, but if you just look up 94 calls to action, you'll see that as an effort to close the gaps that were created by the impact of residential schools. In the U.S., we called them boarding schools. In Australia, right? This was all this. They didn't have them in New Zealand, from my understanding, but in Australia, Canada, and the U.S., they all followed a British program of assimilation that involved taking children away from their families and forcing them into more or less Christian-run schools that, if you look at the Merriam Report from 1928, had teachers that weren't qualified to be teachers, where 50% of the day children did manual labor, that they were overcrowded, undernourished, the death from preventable diseases was incredibly high. Basically, that it was a funneling mechanism into low-wage, low-skilled labor, and that has created some of the economic conditions that our populations experience today. And so, as part of the 94 calls to actions to address those things, there's a whole set of recommendations specifically for the criminal justice system. So, I think it'd be, a wise measure to look at how other countries are doing it better, not just, Canada, where I get to exist right now, but also New Zealand. They're, I would argue, are 50, 60 years ahead in terms of the government's political will. And that's not just because of altruism or just good people. It's because of a lot of political pressures. It's because of a political majority. There's a lot of things that go into why Indigenous people have more leverage in those contexts than the U.S. But there are a lot of cities in the U.S. and counties and states that have better outcomes. But I am just not as qualified to speak on those things. In terms of the way that this data could be used for PCCEP, I think that for now at least, it could be used to say we have a public perception problem. That at least in terms of public perception, folks think that things ain't good. And I think that this needs corroboration with Indigenous community members. I think that if they say, like, yeah, I was doing things wrong, but I still got treated worse than other folks that do things wrong. And if there's police, like this kind of work has been done in Australia, where they interviewed, for whatever reason, they had more freedom to interview police officers in Australia. And in Australia, the results were pretty clear. The Indigenous police officers were like, man, people are mad racist here. And then when they interviewed non-Indigenous police officers, they were like, oh yeah, we think about these people as lower people. So like there's lots of different ways, there might be allies and folks that are like cutting youth a break and being like, you know what, like I identify with this people, or like I'm a stepdad, or I have kids that are half indigenous, and like I'm working for but those voices are invisible. We don't have those narratives, we don't have this understanding. So I think in terms of what PCCEP could do is, we could say, like I said, we have a PR problem here, and maybe we can delve deeper, and the more access that PCCEP could get to data, especially like police reports and that kind of thing, the better that we would be able to speak about kind of objective examples where interventions or visions or more heightened accountability could happen.
Thank you, Dr. Murray. Ashley has a question. Go ahead, Ashley.
Yeah, thanks, Teresa. Yes, thank you so much for being here. I've been really looking forward to this presentation, and I've been a PCCEP member since the summer of 2022. So going into my second year, and it's always kind of a learning curve as a new PCCEP member to gather all the information that has come before this space in the past. So it was really, really great to hear that this work was being done. And I know we've been trying to, schedule time for you to be back in the public. So thank you so much for your patience and working with us. I just want to recognize you probably had to, by doing this work, I know you were trying to save or not re-traumatize people, but I imagine it was really hard work to read and listen and look through all of these stories. So just want to recognize that. And then I also want to recognize that we just, that Missing and or Murdered Indigenous People Women's Day was just on May 5th. I had the honor of being part of some really great collaboration space to raise awareness around the region. I know the city of Portland just had their proclamation making May 5th, I believe it's May 5th, Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Day, a Relatives Day. The Metro government has done it. They did it last year, proclaiming every May 5th as MMIWP Day. I know the county has done one, did one last week. So I just bring that up because I think these are spaces where, we're having the government really say, we know that this is happening, and it is just a day and it is just a proclamation, but I think it's something that we can hold our leaders to and our elected officials to. So I was just thinking of that, and then, thinking about what PCCEP can do to kind of move this conversation forward. I think what I've come to learn about what PCCEP can do is we can provide the spaces for this forum to share information, connect people, get all of the players in the room. I want to point out that Natasha Hasenberger is here, and she helps lead the training unit. And just thinking like, what can those connections be in terms of incorporating this information into training? There's definitely like a process for police training, but these culturally sensitive information sharing and data sharing, I think is where PCCEP can be the glue. Like that's where PCCEP can fall into. And then I think from there, we figure out like what the recommendation could be, because the recommendation is the space where the advisory group, the mayor has, the current mayor has 60 days to get back to us. So, and we, I think we've come up with a process of PCCEP in the last couple of years to think about how we strategize to make that recommendation, median and make it, and it usually comes from, providing a lot of space for public testimony and public discourse. And, I also want to recognize that sometimes the space can be a place for re-traumatizing. And I know we've gotten that feedback before too, because people are coming and telling their stories, and then where is that information going? So, just recognizing that complexity. But with that said, I think I'm really excited to, think about how PCCEP can lead, because you guys did this for us. So I don't want, I think PCCEP, we really do need to be thinking about how we're using this data to move forward in those relationships and that connection sharing. I think that we have the influence to do. So I just wanted to say that out loud. And I think there's definitely more to come. But I I think this is really, really important work, and thank you so much for diving into this part of it.
Thank you, Ashley. Do we have any others who have questions or comments? Charlie, I saw your hand up and then you brought it down. Did you still want to share your question?
I do. I didn't know I took it down. Sorry.
Go ahead.
All right, thank you. Oh, I don't know. I want to tell a story, but yeah, my name's Charlie. Michelle Wesley. I'm a tribal member of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde here, and out towards the coast is Res. And oh, I was one of the only Indigenous folks on the Police Accountability Commission that just wrapped up in August. And I learned that when you talk about being concerned about re-traumatizing many of us who have extensive trauma in the Indigenous community, there's many of us who want our voices heard. We really do, because our voices, and I've said this before, are a gift. It's a gift, especially when we are going to chance being re-traumatized. But living in this world, in this city, is traumatizing the way it is. And we need to start speaking up and speaking out. And take, you know, for those of us who are willing to do that. And, you know, I found my voice. I did find it in recovery. But in recovery, I also found out how much trauma I have, you know, and I want to do something about it. And, you know, I'm a prior drug and alcohol counselor, peer mentor, and I still support women in recovery or anyone who actually needs it. But without our voices, they're not going to get a clear picture. And they continue to create systems that harm us instead of help us when they don't hear our voices. And when you talked about going to like the police reports and stuff like that, I'm from the hood too. I wasn't raised on the res, but I know a lot of people of us who, you know, it's hard to get out of there without a criminal record. And we would just laugh at the police reports because there was so much bullshit, right? To lean that benefit them, not us, so that you don't get a clear picture there. And that's how it is across the board with media and other agencies where we get info. Our voices have been silenced for too long, and it still is. And so I encourage for Indigenous folks who are willing to take that chance, you got to have their voices in here and their lived experience, because I keep hearing about this lived experience thing that's so valuable, but then I also find out, you know, they really don't want to hear it. So I don't know what the, you know, so yeah, I could go on, but thanks for doing this. Yeah, I think the data is important, but you know, lived experiences and our voices are so valuable. Anyway, thanks.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you for sharing. Dr. Murray, did you have any thoughts, or Theo?
I agree. I think stories like that's essentially what data is. The solicitation, collection, analysis. That's storytelling, and like just telling stories. I think is a powerful means for PCCEP, for the PCCEP to move the needle, to have these kinds of conversations. I think having a town hall, having like this a big summit. I know that that there aren't really focused community relationships summits with Indigenous people that I've ever heard of that are off reservations, but I think that would be a cool space for the PCCEP to really lead. I know that would take a lot of time and effort, but having a relationship with tribes, having a relationship with the chief of police, having a relationship with the elected officials, and getting all of these folks into a room, whether it's virtual or in person, I think would yield some results, positive or negative or kind of ambivalent, I don't know, but it would probably yield something. and I think it would provide some more stories to tell, Char, to your point.
Thank you, Theo. Next, looks like we have Tia. She has a question. Go ahead, Tia. You're on mute. Let's unmute you. There you go.
When I first started with PCEP in 2021, we did have listening sessions. And I can't remember exactly how we moved those through to the police and the mayor, but I know that was really powerful. I wasn't part of the setup, but I know it was powerful and well attended. I was thinking about that, and then I also was thinking about media as a really huge topic tonight, and was wondering if Stephanie Howard had anything to say about how does the mayor's office have any kind of I don't know the word, if they have any kind of relationship with media in Portland and what we could do around that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're open to suggestions. The media in Portland, you know, the mayor certainly has the ability to be a voice and to advocate and to be, you know, a platform. So I think we're absolutely open to, you know, recommendations for how we can support that. And I think welcoming Adam to the team recently is going to be a huge part of how we incorporate that into, you know, our everyday lens and how we communicate.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah, I think
Go ahead. Sorry.
bringing together, you know, a little bit of what Charlie was sharing and sort of Ashley speaking to the way PCCEP has often tends to use our platform in planning these sort of larger scale events or town halls, and you know, kind of hearing those stories and having this space for connection. I think there's a lot of potential there. And you know, I think we have a lot of trusted community partners. I think it's really encouraging to see you here, Adam, and I think there's a lot of potential moving forward to work with you and your team on issues like this. And yeah, I think, you know, this is perfectly suited for the PCCEP space. Kind of, you know, I kind of heard some resonance between Charlie, what you were speaking to, and exactly the kind of work that PCCEP has been kind of focusing on, and kind of what they've always done. So yeah.
Great, thanks, Dory. Tia, did you have any other comments?
Now let me lower my hand.
Okay.
Oh, no.
Byron, now I see Byron's hand up. Go ahead, Byron.
This is a question for Adam, for both Adams or Theo. Are they looking for more outreach in this situation, or get more voices? Or because I work with an indigenous fella, and downstairs every Wednesday there's a big gathering, a big eating at the community center on 46th and Belmont every Wednesday night. They used to do drums over here at this church behind my apartment, but COVID came and turned it out, so they weren't able to come up and have drumming sessions. So if you're looking for outreach or more input or more voices, that would be a good start right there.
So, you know, I think that this is a question for PCCEP. You know, this is a commitment, like you know, not to say that I'm not trying to do my best in lots of different arenas. You know, got about 20 years now, and you know, trying to do things within this realm that I've gained credentials in and gained skills in, you know, but really I'm just a small guy, you know. So I think, like, you know, PCCEP being a group of people that all have networks and all have influence and all have passions and all have strengths and all have skills and all have talents and they're bringing all these things together to bring their minds together, bring the energies together. You know, I think, like, if something that PCCEP, you know, wanted you know, me to help with, I mean, like, I'm down, you know, but like it's not the same, you know, like there's nothing that I can write or publish or anything like that that's going to influence it the same way that y'all are going to do in your local environment. You know, and so like if PCCEP was like, listen, we want to take this to the next stage. We want to get people's opinions. We want to get leaders involved. We want those voices to be heard. You know, we want this, you know, despite how we might have to listen to hard stories, we want to hear them. You know, then that's something that like PCCEP can commission, you know, and it doesn't have to be me. You know, you could do it yourselves, or you could hire other people. I think that the only benefit of involving someone like myself who's kind of entrenched within this particular sector is that myself and other folks that work alongside of me and folks that work for me and folks that work in my lab, what we've been working to do our best to learn how to translate what Indigenous people are thinking and fighting for and feeling within and translate that through a set of empirical methods that we know that the other side trusts those methods. So it's a translational activity. Native people don't need to research themselves to understand themselves. They already understand themselves. The idea is to try to communicate this to somebody who's in an office who has dozens of different screaming voices at them, and they're saying, well, what's worth spending taxpayer dollars on? And if we can say like, this is worth it because look at there's data that meets the standards of credibility that you accept. You said you accepted it. So here's some information that says what people have been saying for a long time, but we're saying it in a way that you can represent it to your colleagues, your constituents, your shareholders or whatever, and they'll say, okay, well, that's good data by the standards that we accept. And then maybe that helps, right? We have to think about the long game. 500 years we've been fighting these things. You have to think about the long game. So, you know, if this helps, you know, to sway people who are in the middle, if this helps people to fight for your cause when you're not in the room, then it's doing something good. And if it's not, then let's not waste the time, right? It's a lot of work. It's a lot of resources. It's a lot of thinking hard, you know, and if it's not doing what PCCEP wants to do, if it's not working for the Indigenous people in Portland and Multnomah County in Oregon, you know, then, you know, let's do something different, you know. But what's important is that the folks that are on the ground, these things, it's very easy for us to walk around and give each other high fives, you know. So we have to have some type of accountability check, you know, to make sure that the things that we're doing are still tied into the things that when we talk to our cousins and our nephews and stuff, that it still sounds cool. You know, once it starts getting too abstract, once it starts getting too cerebral, now we're playing a philosopher's game or something. And those sometimes those fights are important too. I'm not trying to diminish that. It's just I wouldn't want to say, yes, you know, Byron, connect me with these folks that you're hanging out with, connect me with your friends. They can tell me the worst thing is that trauma experience that gets voiced doesn't go anywhere. Right. So that like I'm okay listening to hardship. I'm okay facing that. I'm okay thinking about it, but not just for the sake of thinking about it. Like I wanted to, you know, move something. I wanted to mobilize something. I want to change something. So I think that's a question more for PCCEP.
Thank you, Dr. Murray. And I know that our members have talked about intentionality and going out into community and having meetings in community. So maybe this is something that our members can think about and going to the Indigenous people of Multnomah County. And maybe, you know, NEA is a facility that they can go to, or, you know, there's other opportunities, but I really love the conversation here. Next we have Natasha. Thanks, Natasha. Go ahead.
Thank you, Teresa, and thank you, Dr. Adam and Theo, and especially Charlie for your input contribution about lifelong advocacy. In this area, again, Dr. Adam, I work in the Portland Police Bureau, and I will only make a comment if you would allow me, Charlie, to add on and highlight the relevancy and significance and priority about storytelling. Although I am part and represent criminal justice system, when it comes to data, that is problematic, and there's we can have debates about criminal justice data capturing a true scope and magnitude of victimization involving Native American community members. So that in itself is problematic and skewed. And I had the privilege about 2 years ago sitting on a panel where Native American women leaders and storytellers do not believe in mainstream justice data as the governing set for depicting the issues, trends, and victimization. So I have to strongly agree with Charlie, the power and value of storytelling to capture what's missing in archaic traditional criminal justice metrics is probably foundational, since PCCEP is, overseeing and working with PPB. That is so essential to have a conversation about it, because if you look into our data, there is no issue, there is no problem. And I can only speak in the very limited arena of criminal justice, which is human trafficking and domestic or intimate partner violence. But there's a host of other issues, injustices, and patterns that are not even being captured. And it's hard to address something that traditional system, right, doesn't have any understanding about. So really, thank you, Charlie, for your sincere contribution and your continuous education of the system, and your patience. Can't really even emphasize that. Thank you. And thank you, Teresa.
Thank you, Natasha.
So, you said a lot of things in a short amount of time, and I can't respond to all of them adequately. But one of the things you talked about was trust in the system. And when you think about it, the Indigenous Religious Freedoms Act was in 1978. I was born in 1981. That means it was illegal to pray, right? Until what, 4 years before I was born? I'm not allowed to pray, go to the government, go to jail. And so like there's definitely ways that ceremony and religious things, like there's a mistrust between the government and the law enforcement apparatus that it's not unjustified. These are things that like these are legitimate whether or not you call them ethnocentric or whether or not you call them racist, depends on your scholarly pursuits. But the distrust there, it's not for no reason, right? It's not just because if you talk, I've been lucky because I'm I was raised in Los Angeles. I'm an urban kid, I have lots of mixed family members. I love white people. I love everybody. I got lots of things, that have helped me influence my opinions and help me influence my experiences. And I talk with folks, and they're like, "Well, isn't there more crime that happens in y'all's native communities?" And you're like, "Yeah, oh man, how do I overcome these kind of simple heuristics? How do I add complexity to what would otherwise be a simple narrative? And it's like, yeah, okay, but criminal activity also follows poverty. Why is there more poverty in these environments? Okay, well, let's look at the history. You don't colonize impoverished nations. You colonize wealthy nations because they have control over enormous resources. So there's reasons why there's poverty, and with poverty flows health issues, and it flows criminal justice issues, and it flows education issues. And so there's a lot of things where it's like it's not enough to say, well, who's committing the most petty crimes? Well, it's like, okay, why aren't white collar crimes being punished more? What is this thing? What is this thing about criminal rates? And so, like, yeah, I'm not saying, like, I've known lots of folks that have done mean things to each other, horrible things to each other, and I've known folks that do mean things to each other that are white. I've known people that do bad things to each other that are native, and it's like I'm not trying to dismiss that stuff or say that stuff doesn't happen. you know, but I'm trying to think like, we're not trying to think about why my brother or why my nephew or whatever does what he does. I'm trying to think about how this happens across 10,000 people, across 100,000 people, across 1 million people. You know, and when we think about that, we have to think about the way that the system interacts with people. You know, and when there's a trust relationship there that's at jeopardy, it's like, okay, well then, you know, let's think about the context and think about, you know, trying to heal these things and try to make systems work for everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Murray. I'm looking to see if there's any other hands for comments or questions. I don't see any. So Tia, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. I was just saving the chat. I'm here. Do we have, thank you so much, everyone. I just was looking for a transitional slide.
Yeah, before we move on, yeah, PCCEP members, any or really anybody here, any final thoughts, questions, comments about how PCCEP might sort of carry this forward, or, you know, and maybe we need some time to marinate, but I just want to make sure we have just a second to pause on that before we move on. Ashley?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say, I want Adam and Theo to know that PCCEP is very grateful for the work that was done on this, and we will do something with it, and we will pursue it. And as the co-chair, I'll make sure it's on our agenda to kind of figure out, you know, next steps. And so we look forward to inviting you to other conversations, and yeah, we just look for more collaboration. As that was a limitation, and I feel like that's an easy one to get over. So thank you again for your time and all your energy into this. Very grateful for it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. I see Leslie has her hand up also. Go ahead, Leslie.
I do. I feel bad going after Ashley because I think she kind of encapsulated our commitment as PCCEP, but I really do want to thank you for coming. And I think you're right, Adam, the first step is awareness. And, you know, some of the statistics and the things that you showed were definitely things that were very eye-opening for me. You know, just the lack of media coverage, for example, and, you know, those types of things that, like, you know, will stick with me personally. And I will, you know, Dory's right, need to marinate, need to figure out how we can incorporate it, but this is definitely something that is going to sit with me as I do this work. So thank you.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thanks, Leslie.
Again, thank you so much, Dr. Murray. Thank you, Theo, for being here and providing such a amazing presentation with great data that is really, I think the entire group here is going to do a lot of processing. And as mentioned, they're going to figure out how they can further engage and see where they go with the report and the presentation you gave today. Thank you. Now we'll go ahead and turn it over to Tia again to give us an update on the brain injury policy and public safety update.
Thank you so much. I was, there's a lot to process, and I was just finishing up my notes, and yes, the transition was hard to go from all the things I was thinking, wanted to thank the speakers and then move on to the next step. But anyway, it was awkward for a second for me. Thank you. I wanted to give an update on our PCCEP Brain Injury Forum. Byron and I at PCCEP have been working on organizing the Brain Injury and Policing Public Safety Forum, along with the Brain Injury Connections Northwest, since September. We have been able to establish it to be held on June 26th. There's also a few slides that goes with this that I don't see up yet. Okay, here we go. We are scheduled to have our forum on June 26th. We have 3 of our panelists / speakers confirmed. We have some venues that we're really hoping for, and we're working on booking those next, sending out invitations to about 50 to 100 community stakeholders, and working on quite a few other details, but things are coming into place. We have presented this forum for a couple of times with PCCEP. We've been working on it for months, and we're just really excited that's going to be coming in June. We will have another planning meeting, and we'll share with you any more updates at that point, but this is where we're at right now. I think the last detail we're working on is going to be connecting with community discussion leaders to lead us on some really important topics during the brain injury policing and public safety forum. But that's about all I have to share tonight.
Thank you, Tia. Do any of the members have any questions for Tia? Any comments? Go ahead, Leslie.
Yeah, I just wanted to check, you know, it's you and Byron have been doing like a really great job getting everything organized and together, but I wanted to check in and see if and where you need support.
Oh, great, thank you. That's a really super sorry, I don't see you anymore. That just threw me off. Thank you for I can't think of the word. Thank you for saying you could help. And I can't think of something right off the top of my head, but we will definitely keep you in mind for how you can support us as we are getting together the ending of our to-do list, which is, I think, maybe just about 10 more items to get through. Mostly it's logistics right now. But sorry, Leslie.
I had a thought, Tia. Yeah, so Tia, we had a planning meeting this week. I think that we'll have more information about how committee members can support probably like the beginning of June. Yeah, because we'll have sort of the rest of it dialed in, and then more of the content pieces and the event pieces. I think we'll have more to share then. So definitely we'll be looking for that from the committee members. So we appreciate that question. Thanks, Leslie.
Thanks, Tori.
Thanks, Tori. I think I saw Ashley's hand up. Did you still have a question, Ashley?
Nope. Same question as Leslie, and yep, I'm on standby.
Okay, great.
Thanks. Do any of committee members have any questions on this particular project? Just opening it up. All right, seeing none, I think we can probably transition into the open public comment section. If you can go to that slide, that would be great. So open public comment. Do you have any comments about items discussed today? What would you like to see a piece of work on next, or anything else that you want to bring to the attention of PCCEP members and the community? So this is a time for people to share anything else or ask any other questions related to the presentation today or anything else. So go ahead and raise your hand, your virtual hand, if you have any thoughts, questions, or concerns. Dory, I see no hands up. I think this might be the first time.
It really might be. Which, you know, I think that means we did a good job. PCCEP members, any business, anything you want to touch base on? Otherwise, we can certainly wrap up a little early here.
Well, Dory, do we just want to share the update for next week?
Yes, yep. That's in the last slide, but may as well share it now. Go ahead, Ashley.
Yeah, I think so next week was supposed to be a scheduled full PCEP meeting. But we decided we didn't have enough agenda to sort of produce a meeting. And I think because we'll be getting new PCEP members by the end of the month, and we'll have some other updates. And Dory, I'm blinking, my brain's blinking on that one agenda item we talked about for some reason. I have my notes in front.
Yeah, pretty substantial one that will be ready. It won't be ready by the 15th, but will be ready by the end of the month is we'll have some draft code language for PCEP members to take a look at and review. As the committee knows and the public may know, PCEP is working on that codification project. So I think that is what that 29th meeting on the 29th will probably focus on. Odelia, you had a comment?
Thank you, Dory.
Yeah, this is totally separate from that, but just something I wanted to bring up for like maybe future PCEP meeting is to talk about protests, and like specifically there's been a number of protests happening in relation to like the Free Palestine movement, and a lot of arrests also happening. That some have been like filmed, some have been written about. So just like keeping that in our minds and thinking through that and how we can bring that to PCEP. Yeah.
Thanks, Odelia. All right, well, I don't see other hands up. So, Dory, I'll turn it over to you to officially close the meeting. If you don't mind.
Yeah, so, and PCEP, any other comments? Just wanting to make sure we catch them all before moving on. All right. Okay, yeah, so again, no meeting next week, but there is that status conference hearing. So PCEP members, as always, any of you are welcome to attend, and some of you will be presenting there. And no meeting, and then full committee end of the month. And as Ashley mentioned, in between all of that, we're also appointing 4 new members this month. So that's exciting news. Okay, well, with that, I just want to thank Theo and Adam again so much for coming and bringing this presentation to PCEP tonight. I think it's really getting the wheels turning for the committee, and you know, looking forward to seeing what they do with it. Really great to have you in our space. Yeah. And I'm sure, I know that sentiment is echoed by all of our members. They were super excited to have you here this evening. Okay, so with that, we are ahead of schedule. So it is 7:48 p.m. and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.